I just want to thank you so much for doing this with us. We really appreciate it. The Middle East is in such a historic point right now. What is it like to be there? What stands out in your mind?
It's so surreal. It's still surreal. And the past 10 days have just been out of this world in, overall a good way, because as long as you're safe and sound, you still feel that it's overall in a good way. Not of course, to undermine the deaths and injuries that have taken place in the course of the events that have, happened over this last week and a half, but you just feel that there is something unusual in the air and on the ground and in reality. So it's quite, exhilarating in that sense.
When you say unusual and exhilarating, are you in fear at all? Are you scared, or is it more excitement?
No, I'm not scared, because it's safe. Actually, personally, on a personal level at least, I live in a neighborhood that is where a lot of Western embassies are housed, including the U.S. Embassy. I mean, I walk to the U.S. Embassy, and so it's very well secured, including, I heard Army tanks around the area where the U.S. Embassy is located.
So when we're watching on television, we see most of the protesters in the central square in Cairo. Can you give us an idea of how other Egyptians are responding?
Which people are responding? To the protesters?
Well, what we're seeing mostly on the news, mostly what we're seeing on the news are the protesters in the central part of Cairo. Is there other people outside of there? Do you have a sense of how other people are responding?
Yes, because actually, remember, the people who are literally standing on that particular ground in Tahrir Square, which, by the way, is the most famous and most important square in the country, being, in the capital city, and also the largest. So it has this, physical and symbolic significance both. So, choosing it was not accidental by the protesters by any means. Now, even those who are not there, and of course the vast majority of Egyptians are not located in Tahrir, it's just that it's unusually packed with, a lot of people, too many at once. But those who are not there, really, I haven't spoken to someone who is not impressed with just how much they've been able to go there and speak their minds and represent the sentiments of just the rest of the population. It's like this, an inevitable thing that was waiting to happen for so long, especially over the last decade, and boom, it finally burst in the form of these protests that are now really the spectacle of the world.
They certainly are. I think everyone's glued to their televisions. When you talk about this explosion that's been waiting for 10 years, do you have any ideas as to what triggered this? Why now?
Well, the events that have been building up to it are certainly just the malnourishment of the country in general, really, literally and proverbially, meaning unusual unemployment levels, even for those who hold, college degrees, and sometimes even, higher levels of education like masters, and awful poverty level. I mean, we have millions of people living under the poverty line that is just so, it's breathtaking. Terrible literacy rates. I mean, we have almost half the population that can't even read and write. We have a lot of corruption throughout the entire system, on the local level, on the central level. And in recent years, I should say really in recent months, the last sort of major event that really got on people's nerves was the parliamentary elections that took place in November of 2010, 3 months ago, that were rigged. I mean, our elections are typically rigged, but the November elections were super rigged in a way that people just felt incredibly offended and insulted. And, of course, they were rigged so that, the vast majority, an unusual, overwhelming majority of seats went to the ruling political party, which happens to be the NDP, the National Democratic Party. And so that was in November. And in January, when Tunisia had their own uprising, it was sort of like the last bit of encouragement for them to sort of go ahead and literally take to the streets.
And do you feel that the press in Egypt, getting a lot of information from them? Are you getting it mostly from other outlets?
Okay, forget state television, of course, because state television it's sort of like, how we classically talk about, Soviet Union television during the Cold War. Okay, I mean, I don't want to sound dramatic, but it wouldn't be too far-fetched analogy if you apply it here. Now, of course, the privately owned Egyptian media are a different story. They have always had different and more liberal and open representations than state TV, but particularly after January 25th, it's like the ceiling on media freedom has been, raised even further and further, and the courage with which they express their analysis and their take on events and the diversity of opinions and perspectives has been incorporated even more vividly, and that's been so refreshing to see. And especially here, so many millions of Egyptian households have satellite television, so not only do they get exposed to their own private and state media, but also international media. We have British, American, French, German news channels and non-news channels all over the place. So we're not deprived that way. Granted, they cut off the internet between Friday and this past Wednesday morning, but ever since the internet was hooked back on, and they realized that this is not helping in curbing the protesters' might, and people are back online full force, blogging their chronicles of the quote unquote uprising. I shouldn't really put in quotation marks because it is technically an uprising, in my judgment anyway. And things are going pretty well.
As a journalism professor with that background, are you encouraged? What do you think about as you watch all this happening, unfolding, as far as influence of media on this uprising?
Of course, when it's so interesting because I one of the things, and you have a great question you asked right there, is that when you watch the protesters holding up their signs, especially in Tahrir Square, and you see all those images broadcast. Of course, I can read Arabic because it's my native language, so I read their signs, and I know that they are media savvy enough that these signs are not only going to be visible to the local population, but also to the world outside. And also, you will probably have noticed already that sometimes English and German signs, the ones I've seen, are also held up by protesters. These are obviously not targeted to the local population. They're clearly targeted to the world outside because they want people outside Egypt to understand and to comprehend what they're saying and why they're doing what they're doing. So, to look at this media-savvy group in downtown Cairo that knows that it is a media spectacle, that it is by every measure a media event, that's one of the things, one of the major things that alert my attention as someone who teaches journalism and media and communication to students. Of course, I haven't been able to interact with students in a classroom setting yet because we were supposed to start school a few days ago, at least the university that I work at, and school has been postponed, of course, due to the unusual events. So we have a tentative date to start in a couple of weeks, but that's not even certain yet because we don't know how they will unfold in the next in the next days.
It's interesting, you note the signs are in English, and here in Los Angeles there's a lot of support for the Egyptian people. Mm-hmm. Do you think are the people there aware of that support, of the protests that are happening here as well?
They certainly broadcast them on TV here. And not only that, but because of the social media, because of the revolution that the social media have, really triggered and pushed a lot of people, because even those who are not engaged in social media, the people who are, especially the Egyptian youth, they tell people who are not online what is going on online. And because they are even more media savvy than their, predecessors in terms of, generationally, their parents and their grandparents, they are eager to tell them about what's going on. They tell them, in Germany, this and that is happening in the U.S. and Australia, and neighboring Arab countries, they're saying such and such about us. So not only do you have already TV channels available to people who are not very electronically engaged, but you also have the generation that is very electronically engaged, informing their non-electronic counterparts, if you will, about what is going on the internet.
Do you think without social media, this revolution could have happened?
I think it would have happened anyway, but I think social media played a role in expediting the process. And, I guess the most recent Egyptian, it wasn't, of course, it was nowhere near this scale, but back in 2008, we had a Facebook movement that's still running. It started, of course, from Facebook, but it has now become an organization, a political organization that has, of course, members, including some, very well thought of intellectuals and so forth, named the April 6th Youth Movement. It started on Facebook. And the reason it's called April 6th is because they called for a national strike on April 6th as a form of protesting against the government, including the corruption and, the unsatisfactory, wage levels and so forth. And so the April 6th movement really sort of started with a sparking rod and really paved the way for, the activity, political activity via social media, participated in primarily, like I said before, by young people who really just wanted to see change materialize and go beyond just dreams and aspirations. And lo and behold, they did succeed, and everybody, really the whole society owed it to them, and they feel and they appreciate it so much. I mean, they have that much gratitude to those people because they're the ones who took matters into their hands lawfully, peacefully, and they've started the path for real change.
And the political scene from this point forward, how do you suspect it will change after this?
Well, for starters, we've practically demonstrated via those courageous souls how much public opinion can go in terms of political reform, and not just political reform, but fast political reform, tangible political reform that people can see with their own eyes very fast. And that's one thing. Something else is that, you've sort of, I talked a few minutes ago about the ceiling that has been sort of lifted or at least raised substantially in terms of freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And this certainly, people have this internal feeling that we can't regress, we can't go back again, we can only go forward from here. So because they've also sort of retaken back that self-confidence, that yes, we are able to go that far. We are capable of engaging in activity that would yield, substantive, tangible political reform.
It's really fascinating to hear about, your experiences there. Is there anything else that you would want to add that I haven't asked you, that you think that would be relevant for us to know?
I just want to say that, people, I guess currently, they're sort of, really, if I were to pinpoint two major sentiments in the country, of course I'm speaking for myself, and I imagine I'm speaking for, a lot of people, sort of, maybe a mainstream perspective, and justifiably so, that on the one hand, this, glorious, sense of, wow, wow, this happened, and this happened in my lifetime, and I get to witness it firsthand, especially those living in Egypt, residing in Egypt right now, like myself. And at the same time, this sense of anticipation. How is this going to culminate? What is it going to culminate in, and how? And what are the next few weeks going to look like?
Yeah, that you're, and we all wait with bated breath to see how this is all going to continue to unfold. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.